Hello, hello, this is River Devora. I got cut off from my first bunch, so I guess it was time to take a break. Anyway, so I'm not going to jump into a second round of prayers or any of that kind of stuff because this is just a continuation from part one. Um, we were talking about spiritual cleansing techniques, and I had pretty much gone through most of my techniques. We were talking about ritual cutting, unbinding, and unhooking. I described some ways of doing that. I was doing a little bit of show and tell. The last thing I'm going to just say about the spiritual cleansing techniques is that you can combine them. Um, and again, we're talking about cleansing a person, yourself, or somebody else, cleansing an object, cleansing a space, cleansing all of the above. I talked a little bit that you can combine techniques, like for example, using an aromatic while also using a broom, using the broom or a fan to move that aromatic around. Um, I was about to talk about egg cleansings and it cut off. So I'm going to take that as a sign that I shouldn't talk about egg cleansings. It's a great technique, maybe a little bit more culturally specific. But so anyway, the sky's the limit when it comes to cleansings. Um, in general, again, most, but not all of the traditions that I work in recommend that you kind of start at the top and work your way down. I have one tradition that says you start at the bottom and work your way up because it's a different tradition. You're working with different spirits and different beings. But so again, when you're kind of DIYing this, when you're cobbling this together for your own purposes, do what feels right or what's appropriate for your situation, your space, your tradition, etc. But in general, spiritual cleansing is a good idea. Um, I like to spiritually cleanse myself pretty often, like daily, at least a very brief little wipe down of myself. I cleanse my space before and after I use it. So if I'm going to have a meeting, uh, including on a Zoom call, if I'm going to teach a class, if I'm going to have a more fraught or difficult or important conversation, I may clean myself in my space beforehand. I clean my tools and my objects before and after I use them, especially if I'm using them for spiritual purpose. So I think that's a pretty big we've covered a lot of ground with regard to the spiritual cleansing kind of stuff. Um, let's see, what else are we going to cover? Choosing the right technique, again, what's physically safe and appropriate for your space, what's culturally appropriate for your needs, what are you trying to cleanse away? You may choose different techniques for like a daily cleansing versus like that you stepped in something or you're preparing for something. You may want to kind of increase the intensity of um, what it is that you're trying to clear off. Um, I find that noise-based techniques are great if I'm worried that there are sentient entities of some sort or another in my space. Like it rattles them away, it shakes them off. Um, Also, sound is sometimes good. Sound and penetrating smells are good when it seems like the energies are kind of caked on. You want something that's going to kind of get in there. Um, when a space feels heavy, any of the like moving, like brushes and fans and feathers, things that are going to kind of move the energies sometimes is going to be better. So, again, you kind of want to just, some of this is like, you're just going to guess. Like, I'm not sure. I tried something. How do I feel? Like, check in with how you feel. Does it feel like the space feels a little bit lighter? Does the space feel like it's a little easier to breathe? Do I physically feel less congested or less heavy? Do I feel like I'm moving more easily? Then the technique probably worked. I don't notice any change at all. Well, maybe I'm a person that doesn't notice that stuff anyway, or maybe I am a person who does notice that stuff, and that wasn't enough to have done the thing I needed to do. Um, I'm cleaning because somebody came to my house dragging all of their crap with them. It's going to be different than like, I'm just, freshening the place up a little bit. You might choose different techniques depending on your situation. And again, if you are part of a tradition, or if you are associating with specific blessed powers that come out of specific traditions, it's worth it to look to the tradition or look to the history that that tradition may have originated from or come out of, and think about what might be appropriate based on what blessed powers you're interacting with, to choose different techniques. Um, you could also choose cleansing items that are associated with the specific beings that you are working most closely with. So, like, for example, I'm a devotee of the Matroni. We know from, you know, uh, surviving items of theirs that they seem to have been associated with coins and with bread and with goats, for example. Random example. So when I've done spiritual cleansings to prepare to work with them or to prepare myself to work with them, or I'm doing work under their auspices or in their name, I may cleanse with goat milk or with coins or with bread, etc. So again, you can kind of pair some of the things that you know about the beings you're in relationship with what might be appropriate for your type of cleansing that you're working on. Again, you want to think about what you're cleansing away and then what happens to that energy when you've taken it off yourself, your space, or your object. Um, is the gunk, the evil eye, the dust and gravel, is it going to be destroyed or dissipated by your technique? So, like airborne techniques, sound techniques, we're just going to like rattle it to pieces and now it's going to be dispersed and shoot out like dust. Is that thing that you're cleaning out still cohesive in some way? Like, for example, is it a spirit you're chasing out of your space? If so, the proper cleansing might include some way to hand that spirit over to another being, or, somebody that can imprison them or remove them or shoo them along or get them where they're supposed to be, which is not with you. Um, again, I introduced earlier the concept that what may harm us energetically may be useful to another being. Again, we have that concept in some of the Afro-diasporic and African traditional based traditions. Um, so, there's that idea, but again, your mileage may vary, and you want to make sure that you're checking in with your powers about that. Um, I've had times where the energies themselves that I'm trying to clean off feel more sticky, more harmful, or bigger. So, I have at times literally dug a hole in the ground and cleaned myself with things I can bury, and then cover that up. If I don't have access to or the ability for a variety of reasons to be able to dig a literal hole in the ground, um, I've used techniques to visualize opening up a space in the ground or a portal to somewhere else. And again, I have spirit relationships that allow me to do some of that kind of stuff. But you can imagine, like, I'm imagining digging in the ground and opening energetically a hole in the ground purely from visualization. And now I'm going to clean off, put it into that hole, cover the hole back up. I may speak some gratitude and blessings into the earth. Please accept this, compost this, use it for what you will. Done. We've thrown it away. Now we're done. Also, in some of my traditions, we have this idea of like we may clean ourselves with, say, candy or grains or something disposable and then throw it away in a literal trash can off our property. So we don't want that energy to come back with us. Um, I have done cleansings with myself or on behalf of other people where we take whatever stuff we're using to clean with, put it in a paper bag. I've driven it to hospitals and thrown it away in the trash can outside of hospitals. Like, this energy was making people sick. This is the place where sickness goes to be defeated. Defeat this here. So, there's different ways you can get kind of creative with stuff like that as well. Um, so yeah, I think that's everything about spiritual cleansing. I will name that I am part of traditions that also sometimes do spiritual cleansings with live animals. I'm in 3 different traditions, including Judaism, that does have some historical use of live animals. Uh, if you're gonna do anything like that, please have it be traditionally specific and know what you're doing. Do not accidentally, don't flub that one with some precious living being. Um, these things can be done safely and humanely, but real important that you're doing those kinds of really intense. I mean, we don't take that lightly. We don't take a life lightly. So, if you're going to be engaging with live animals in any way, shape, or form, like make sure you really know what you're doing and you know how to do that ethically, humanely, cleanly, and well. But man, worth naming. Lots of options out there. Let's talk some more about spiritual protections. We're going to talk about that next. So, when we're looking at spiritual protections, the next questions are, well, number one, what are we protecting ourselves from? Um, what are the benefits of spiritual protections? What are the limitations? And then what are we protecting and who protects us? Where does the protection come from? So, let's start with some of the nuts and bolts on that one. Um, what are we protecting ourselves from? We kind of went through that in the first part of the program a fair amount. We talked about intentional hexes and curses. We talked about um, evil eye, the sort of not entirely intentional. So nobody's sitting down with like a black candle and a mouthful of bad words for you kind of thing. So there's evil eye, and then there's also like harm that may come from miasma, harm that may come from walking through something, harm that may come because we've pissed somebody off intentionally or unintentionally, rightfully or wrongfully. These are some of the things that we're kind of protecting ourselves against. Things that are coming to us personally, individually, like we actually did. It is intended with our name on it versus like I happen to be part of a group um, with direct association or indirect association. Things are getting thrown at that specific group or harm is coming to that specific group. Um, so step one is going to be avoiding harm to begin with, right? That's the best way to be spiritually protected is to avoid the harm from the get-go. So that would be a good starting place. Obviously, there's lots and lots of ways to avoid harm to begin with. Spiritual cleansing is part of avoiding harm, right? So we've already done a pretty deep dive on spiritual cleansing, at least, kind of surface level, looking at a lot of that stuff. Um, Contracting with protectors. So there may be a limit to what we can do consciously, intentionally ourselves, but when we start actually partnering with other beings, our options get a lot broader. I am under the impression that if I am going to go through the intense, blessed, and beautiful process of swearing an oath or taking on an initiation with a tradition or with an individual power, that part of like what they get is my devotion and whatever else is specific to our oath. But what I should get in return, at least partly, is their protection. If they want me to be able to do their work in the world, they have to help me be able to do that. And that includes helping to keep me safe. If you have oaths already in place with any gods or spirits or beings of a variety of sorts, if you haven't already, you certainly can approach them and pray for their protection. There are certain powers where that's part of their job. Like, for example, in the Norse tradition, Thor is the one who protects humanity. Now, humanity is a very broad concept. So, Thor may protect his own in kind of a bigger way, but you could certainly pray to him for protection. Um, I've prayed, Thor is one of my, love him, one of my folks. Sometimes it's more effective to have somebody a little bit smaller who can kind of keep a much more personal eye on you. And so then, rather than asking some entity as vast as a god for the god themselves to protect you and watch over you, you could certainly do that. And I'm not saying you shouldn't. In fact, you probably should. Um, you can also get more specific with them and ask, like, is it possible, given the type of service that I am oathed to doing for you and with you, could you help me by assigning me a protector or a team of protectors? I know lots of folks that do this. I definitely have this, and it's a wonderful way to get that little bit of extra help and protection, where, you know, Like I have certain gods where like they're big and they're busy. Like I'm not gonna ask them to like come with me to the grocery store and make sure that my car gets there safely. But I might be like, do you have somebody that you can assign to me? You can do that as a single practitioner, especially if you have, if you are in a role like a clergy role or a community leadership role, then even more so, then it'd be a good idea if you're doing community working on behalf of a blessed power, ask that blessed power to help you best be able to do that work. Um, if you are associated with a spiritual working group of some sort, with a coven, with a hearth, with a kindred, with whatever your specific languaging is around your association there, especially if the association involves any kind of ongoing oaths or connections where we are all part of the same team. We all, when you say, you know, such and such of the bloodity who's a what's it, then that means you're talking about us, like we have an identity. You can ask the blessed powers or the pantheon or whoever that you're working with or for or you're praying to, can you protect our group? Can you assign a specific protector to our group? And then what is the relationship that we might want to maintain with that protector? As soon as you have any kind of a named being, so first of all, if you have a protector, make sure you have a name for them. Ask for a name for them. Once you have a relationship, make sure you understand what the requirements and protocols are. So, what does maintenance of that relationship look like? Do we make offerings to you once a year? Do we need to call on you in a specific way if we're doing certain kinds of work? Um, is there a time of day that's better or worse for you, or time of year, or time of the month that's better? What are the boundaries of the relationship? What are you willing to help us with, and what aren't you willing to help us with? So, like when I've seen, for example, certain examples of a protector being assigned to a working group, to a spiritual working group, the protector may only protect the members when they're doing work on behalf of the group and may only protect them from harm that may come through the group itself. So, like, maybe your group is going to a protest and people know that the fellowship of the furry donuts is going to the protest, and so then fellowship of the furry donuts has a protector assigned to them that will protect them when they do things on behalf of fellowship of the furry donut. But if you also happen to be like having a nasty divorce, the Fellowship of the Furry Donut Protector isn't necessarily going to help you protect you from, your soon to be ex and their family and their connections, their connections. Or maybe they are, but it's good to get a sense of like what are the boundaries here, who's doing what and who's assigned to what and all that kind of stuff. I will also say, and this is important, the more traditions that you stand in, the more potential protectors and guardians and guides and all the rest of it that you may have coming in to keep an eye on you and to work with you and work for you and all that kind of stuff. Um, in order to make sure that you don't end up with a problem where when I'm standing in tradition X, these protectors are doing this thing and they think I should be going in this direction, but when I'm standing in tradition Y, these other entities are protecting me in this other way. You don't want folks to end up at loggerheads or with some kind of a conflict. So even though I'm a big fan, I'm a big stickler on this one of making sure that like I'm not blending tradition X with tradition Y. Tradition X is tradition X. It's beautiful and complete. And I'm not dragging in little bits and bobs from tradition Y into tradition X or vice versa. But when it comes to like, I want to make sure that my home is protected, that I'm being brought in the correct direction, they have to be in harmony with each other. If I'm making big decisions or if I have a situation that I'm dealing with or any of that kind of stuff, I will do something that I call calling a council meeting, where I will call representatives from all of the different traditions that I stand in. Um, I will literally sometimes put out teacups or little plates of offerings or whatever, um, and have everybody sit down and I'll say like I have now called individually, like I do whatever is the appropriate way of calling the attention of this bunch of entities, et cetera, et cetera. Um, now that I have everybody's attention, here's my ask, or here's my situation, or here's my concern. I want to make sure that you all know to talk to each other so that we can go forward as a whole team. Um, there's a very specific Odoo that comes up in Santeria, where the framework is, you know, the dog has four legs but one path, right? So even if we're standing in multiple traditions, we have to still be going, everybody has to be bringing us in the same direction. Because if one set of beings thinks we should be a doctor and the other set of beings thinks that we should be a mechanic, like we're going and that's not going to work. We need everybody to want the same things and direct us in the same direction. So when you're putting your spiritual team together, and this is absolutely true when it comes to protection, who's in charge of your protection? Um, when I started to find myself standing in a priest type role in multiple traditions, one of the things that was recommended to me that I ended up by spirit that I ended up doing and I have found very effective is I have a spirit whose entire job it is to coordinate my protectors. She has a name, she has a job. We know what her job is. I've taken her around and introduced her to every one of the groups of protectors that I have from different traditions that I stand in, or folks that have kind of signed on for my team. And her job is to coordinate to make sure everybody's protecting me in the same way. So again, like the more disparate your path becomes, the more multi-trad your path becomes, the more important it is that you have spiritual protections and that they are coordinated. And it's your job to put the coordination infrastructure in place to make sure that everybody's doing the same stuff in the same direction. So anyway, okay, contracting with protectors. Initiations, oaths, and partnerships are a type of protection. Um, and they're a big deal, and none of that stuff should be taken lightly. I mean, once you commit to something like that, in some cases changes the fabric of your soul for the rest of this life and possibly all lives. So we definitely want to step into oaths and initiations really intentionally and very carefully. This is not something you should just do because why the hell not? Oh, I just feel like, I don't know, I'm just going to initiate. To what? To who? Why? That's a big deal. But if it's a thing you decide to do, initiations bring certain kinds of protection because now you're under the auspices of something bigger than yourself. You're under the auspices of something that may have ancestors and descendants and lineage that keeps you safe because now the whole line is protected in certain ways. You now have relationships in a much deeper and more profound way with bigger entities, with blessed powers that will help to keep you safe or assign folks to help keep you safe. So again, initiations, oaths, and partnerships are another type of protection as far as like when we're getting into the like how to avoid harm to begin with. I mean, and sometimes like a spirit or a baneful being may look at you and go, oh, like you have the stink of deity so and so on you. I'm not touching that. Like I might have messed with you if you were standing by yourself, but your oath to Odin, I'm not messing with Odin. Your oath to Aphrodite, oh, I'm not messing with Aphrodite, etc. So you do get a certain kind of almost like passive protection when you have certain kinds of oaths or initiation as well. To some degree, there can be safety in numbers. There's also can be additional dangers in numbers. Um, attacks on a group or problems with a group can trickle out to individual members. But, if you are in some kind of a group situation, and again, you can have a certain kind of protection from the whole group, which may enable you to be able to do certain things and to be able to do certain things in a safer way. I will say with groups, and none of this, so I think being part of groups is wonderful and I think it's really, really good protection. But I also want to make sure that we're like speaking out loud the parts that often don't get said. One thing that I've seen happen in certain groups is like, for example, I've seen groups where like one group member is particularly charismatic and that group member may be may end up being kind of like a bit of a lightning rod for problems, which then may emanate out to the rest of the group. So if you are a group where you have a more charismatic member or a more famous member or a bigger name pagan member or somebody who's, published some books or doing some additional stuff in the community, they're a musician, they're doing whatever, um, making sure that you don't have the problem where the whole group has to be able to hold the protection for the whole group if the group itself is going to serve as a bit more of a lightning rod. Additionally, you don't want to have the problem of like that one charismatic person has really good protections, and so then things are getting thrown at them and kind of splashing off them and hitting group members. Because I've seen that happen in a couple of specific groups as well. So but again, I think working in a group is a great way to have additional protections and to be able to do more than you might have been able to do individually. If you are working in a group, you want to make sure that the group has thought about group protections. Who are your protectors? Who have you contracted with? How are you maintaining those relationships at the group level? Um, I'm definitely going to say you want to make sure that you're well protected before starting work that may put you more on the map or more in the crosshairs of certain things. The more higher level your work, the more of a known, named being person you are out in the community, the more important it becomes to keep yourself and your loved ones and your space safe. I think of it as kind of like the moth and flame problem, right? If you are just a little light, you might get a couple of moths coming and trying to like throw themselves at your flame. But if you're shining really, really brightly in the dark, a whole lot more moths are going to come to you. So your need to be protected is going to really go up. When I started doing more bigger scale community work was when I really started to need to end up with higher level initiations. Like it wasn't enough for me to not carry initiation. That's definitely not the only reason why I've initiated into some of the traditions that I have initiated into, but it has definitely driven some of my initiations personally. So it's a thing to consider. Let's talk about some simple protections. So simple protections are often passive. These are great, and there's all sorts of traditional ones. You may have some from your own family or from your own culture that are super effective and totally worth dragging out. Charms, amulets, tattoos, body blessings, all that kind of personal protection. Um, so like I have a beautiful necklace pendant that my aunt bought me when I was a child. I wear it all the time. I'm now 50. I still wear it all the time. I've had it since I was like, I don't know, 7. It's something cultural and specific to my culture, to my family, to my tradition. I still wear it. I still have it. I love it. Super helpful, super useful, because that brings in the protections of my own ancestors, and it was given to me by a family member for that reason. So, those kinds of blessings are really great when you have them, when you have access to them. Um, you can use personally specific or significant symbols, words, prayers, dedications, runes or sigils, or if you have any kind of traditions that have symbolism involved in them. Um, I'm a big fan of tattoos personally. Like you might have different tattoos on you that have different apotropaic properties to them. It's just kind of keeping away evil eye, keeping away whatever. Evil eye protections are extraordinarily common and found worldwide. There's things with eyeballs, right? There's things with, swords. There's things with different kind of symbols, all that kind of stuff. Um, if I'm going certain places, sometimes I'll actually write sigils with skin safe markers on my actual skin. I've definitely done some of that kind of stuff before. When I was pregnant, I was actually doing a little bit more of that kind of thing more regularly, where I was actually drawing sigils on my belly if I knew I had to go someplace where I was worried about protecting. Um, there are times where we're more vulnerable. Pregnancy is definitely a time where you're more vulnerable. Um, let's see. I've been known to draw sigils on the inside of my shoes or on the bottoms of my shoes or even on the bottoms of my feet. So to make sure that I'm not walking through anything I don't want to bring home with me. Um, Sigils around your home or your property, things, witches' bottles are very, very common one, where basically like you take a glass bottle and you fill it with the most disgusting things you can come up with, or you fill it with like pins and nails and things like that. And then you bury it somewhere on your property. Often, again, there's different ways to do them, and don't take this as like a very well done how to. There's lots of ways to do witches' bottles. When I do witches bottles, I usually dedicate the bottle. Like there isn't, in my case, I don't put a spirit inside of that bottle, but like I just said, I had like a spirit protector that coordinates my protections. Like I did those under her auspices. They're buried where she told me to bury them, and she keeps an eye on them and she lets me know if they need any kind of maintenance. Um, there's spirit traps you can put up on doorways. There's sigils or protections you can put on a door to kind of keep things from coming in to begin with. You can put stuff in and around your property, outside and inside. There's all different kinds of ways to do stuff like that. You may have specific amulets dedicated to specific blessed powers. This, again, can be very personally specific and very tradition specific as well. If you're asking a conscious entity to protect you, make sure, again, you have clearly established, respectful, reciprocal relationships already in place. You don't want to assume that generic protective God X of tradition blah is going to protect you just because you have a necklace that represents them. You want to actually have that conversation, make that agreement, ask first, and establish what the parameters are. So charms are items in your space. We talked a little bit about establishing relationships with protective entities. Um, Let's talk a little bit more about that actually. So question number one is like, what gives you the authority or the permissions to enter into that relationship? Do you have an oath in place? Are you practicing that tradition? Are you understood as a practitioner of blah or a member of community blah, family blah, whatever? Like, what gives you that? Where does your authority or permissions come from? If there's established authority, established permissions, that's one thing. If you're trying to establish something where there isn't something already in place, you want to think carefully and intentionally about like, okay, I'm reaching out to being so and so. Why? Why would they interact with me? Like gods and spirits don't need to be in relationship with us. We can't just go on the assumption that like, well, aren't you so happy to have my attention? It's like, well, aren't you so happy to have mine? Are you sure you want that? So, what's the reciprocity? What are the expectations for engagement? Um, is this something that's part of a bigger context? Like, I'm in this tradition and I'm also doing all these other things within the tradition. And so then protection is one more thing that I'm engaging with or asking for or enacting in traditional ways, versus like these are beings that are from traditions that no longer exist or maybe that never existed. And so then maybe we have to kind of start with the protocol, the establishment of protocol from like kind of a little bit earlier in the process. Um, so what is the reciprocity? What are the expectations for engagement? What does relationship maintenance look like? What are the boundaries of what kind of protection I can expect? There are also, I'm going to say, there's different types of beings for different types of protections. Gods are big. They will protect us at a high level. Um, some of them will protect humanity, or they will protect our community, or they'll protect our neighborhood. Um, some depends on how you wrap this stuff up, and I know different people wrap this up and different people have different experiences of it, but I will say that in at least some cases, a god may protect us at a high level, but they may be too big or too busy to walk with us through all the little tiny mundane things. So they may protect us during times of great need, but they're not necessarily gonna keep us from like having a little fender bender. They may keep us from dying in a car accident, but they may not protect us from, having our bumper fall off. So um, the little mundane stuff. Depending on your tradition or your belief system, etc., you can always again start with whatever gods you already have relationships with, and then pray to them and ask them if they might assign a protective entity to you. And again, what does then the god want in return to do that for you, and what might that entity need in return for you? If they're going to lend or assign you a crow and an Einharjar, a guardian, a soldier, etc., what might you need to do for the god first? And again, are you oathed or dedicated to them sufficiently that you can even make that ask? And then what, if any, ongoing maintenance of relationship might you need to do with the entity who's been assigned to you or lent to you? Let's see. I talked about the complexity of working multi-traditionally. Um, Keep your protections appropriately sized to the reality of your spiritual and mundane life. The stronger your protections, most likely, the more maintenance you're going to need to do to maintain them, the greater cost to you potentially for being able to receive them to begin with, right? Um, Again, if you're a spiritual leader, a ritualist, or someone who's working on behalf of others, you're going to have different needs and you're going to be navigating different dangers than if you're a lay person who's not doing those things. If you are a lay person, you do not need super strong Fort Knox style protections. In fact, you may cause yourself more problems than you solve that way. So being realistic about what do I need to be kept safe from? What are the real risks and dangers that are coming around? Because here's another thing you want to think about. Oh, I'm going to go and get the strongest protections possible. If a baneful being comes by and sees that you have this giant, like, super fort set up and all these turret guns and protections, they're gonna go, like, what's going on over there? Like, it maybe, do I want to get in on that? Like, what is that? You may end up drawing more attention than you're avoiding by having your protections be too big and then you not having any reason to be that well protected. Like, then what happens when you leave your fort? So, like, my house is now this giant fort, but then I go out and the spirits are like, hi, like, who are you? I saw that home that you coming out of, like, but now you're not safe at all because now you're just walking around just some random layperson. Like, so, again, like, being realistic about, like, what do you need for who you are and what you're doing in the world? Um, but again, if you're someone who's in the public eye in any kind of a way, especially any kind of a controversial way, but being in the public eye means by definition controversial because people will make a controversy out of like anything. I don't like the t-shirt you're wearing and I don't like the shape of your shoulders and whatever else. And so here we are. And you're out in the world and you said hi and how dare you say hello? God darn it. Right. So if you're out in the public eye, consider that spiritual protections may not be a bad idea. Let's talk a little bit about protecting other people. There are many situations where we may find ourselves in a position where protecting someone else is appropriate. Um, this might be as a parent or as a teacher, as an elder or an initiator, as just concerned neighborhood folks, etc. So we may want to or need to extend protections. So first of all, is it appropriate for us to do that? Sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's not appropriate for us to extend protections. Um, the number one thing to consider when you're extending protections to other folks who aren't already established as being within your consented upon, agreed upon, everybody knows for sure, we've been explicit about it, sphere of protection, you have to establish consent. You have to establish consent. Don't think that just because your intentions are good, that your working must be rightful. This is also true in a spiritual context. I have very strong protectors, for example, that I have initiation with. If some well-meaning person tried to send their spirits my way without telling me first so that I could give my spirits the heads up that they're coming, my protectors would probably assume bad intent and eat them. I've literally had this happen. Like somebody called me up and they're like, I thought you were having a hard time and I sent a spirit to you because I wanted to help. And like, I've been having nightmares all week where my spirit came back injured and I don't know what to do. And I'm like, why didn't you tell me you were sending someone? And I went to my spirits. I was like, what happened? They're like, we didn't know that they were here to help. Some random asshole showed up and we thought that we were being attacked. Who are they? Like, why would we know who they are? So we attacked first. So don't send protections without checking in first. Um, what we can ethically do, what you can ethically do when supporting other people if we aren't able to establish explicit consent first. And when I say explicit consent, I literally mean calling or writing or contacting someone and being like, it looks like you're having a hard time. And I'm wondering how you feel about me sending some protections your way. Is that something you feel comfortable with me doing? See if they say yes or no. And if they say yes, great. Figure out what's the right thing to send over. But if they say no, don't do it anyway, please. Please don't. Not helpful. Um, but things that we can ethically do that in the absence of explicit consent is that we can send what I like to think of as kind of energetic care packages. Um, so support, blessing, strength, and resources to another person or group's protectors, to their blessed powers, or to their ancestors. So, I'll do this sometimes when um, for example, there's protests happening or there's, scary bad stuff coming down the pipes for specific groups that I'm not part of. I might pray to my own gods and powers and ask that resources and love and care be sent to the ancestors of the people who are on the front lines. May those ancestors have the resources they need to do with what they think is correct and what they think is proper and rightful. I don't know what they need. Like, I don't know what somebody else needs. That's not my business or my place. So I'm not going to come in and be like, I'm praying for protection. May there be a line of peace descending upon blah, blah, blah. Like, who the hell am I? Like, I'm not part of that. So I don't know what's rightful. I don't know what's needed. But, like, here's a care package of extra energy. Like, do with it what you think is correct. And if you don't want it, like, you can reject it, spirits. Like spirits, you can reject it and I won't be offended. It's for you if you want that. Here's a care package. Take it if you want that. And, another thing we can do is contact somebody or a group and be like, I would like to offer some sort of spiritual, prayers or protections or whatever. What is going to actually help you? What do you need or what do you want? And they might be like, nothing. I don't want anything from you. Cool. Okay, no worries. Or they might be like, well, we're asking people to say prayers that, court case such and such has the following kind of outcome. So, if you want to say prayers in that direction, that would be great. Make it specific. The more specific that kind of thing is, usually the better, unless it's the case of like, they don't want that, in which case, very, very unspecific in that sense of like, here's energy and help. Do with it what you want. Like, I'm praying for you to have what you need. That is a way to not take that person's power away, to not assume that your protections are rightful and stronger than theirs, that you're lending your support. I mean, and that's the thing when you're trying to do prayers and workings on behalf of somebody else. I've seen this very arrogant thing happen, and it's not intended arrogantly, but it ends up being arrogant. Um, I'm going to pray for protections for this person because I'm assuming that they can't protect themselves. I'm assuming that whatever I have going on is bigger and stronger and more effective than whatever they have going on. Like, folks don't need that. Groups don't need that. Individuals don't need that. So, I may visualize or verbalize sending resources like a care package to someone else's team. Here, please take this strength and these blessings if you want them, and if you can use them, then it's yours to do with as you see best. Then my hands are off, and I'm not determining what's best for you, your situation, your etc. Okay, so I'm going to stop. I've covered a lot of ground here, and I know that all of this was very much just a very, very high level. And again, traditions are specific and traditions may vary. Um, I would love to stay in dialogue and conversation with folks about all these subjects. I love talking about this stuff. If you have a specific situation that you want me to go into more detail around, I'm so delighted to receive any of that information. I am River Devora. I am part of House of Apples. You can find us online. I believe it's houseofapples.org. We are on Instagram and on Facebook and on Blue Sky as House of Apples. We also have a Discord server. So if you can find our website, you can find information about all of these things. Let me get our website up. Um, I'm so bad at this. I'm so sorry. Okay. You can find us at houseofapples.org. So House of Apples, it's all one word, .org. And you should be able to find information about our different programs and services. We do all kinds of stuff. Um, if you get up on our Discord server, you are welcome to engage with the group and with me about some of the, talking through some of this stuff. You can always reach out to me personally at riverdevora@gmail.com. I'm always happy to talk about these things. And if there's other stuff you want me to cover in podcasts, like I have my giant curriculum, but I'm also happy to shape it to what people are interested in hearing about or learning about. So anyway, I'm going to do closing prayers. I thank you so much for your time and attention. Um, and I look forward to talking to you at future podcasts. So Blessings and thanks to all good spirits. Thank you to all who attended this conversation. Thank you to the blessed powers that walk with House of Apples and that walk with Roots and Branches, with Strong Roots, Wide Branches, and that walk with me personally. Thank you to all of the blessed powers that brought each one of the listeners here to engage in these conversations. Blessings and thanks to the internet and to the spirits that stabilize the internet. Blessings to the land, um, to this moment in space, place, and time. Blessings to the guardians and guides, to the protectors. Blessings to our ancestors and descendants, to the lineages. Blessings to the vast guiding forces that know and shape our destiny. Blessings to our allies of all shapes and sizes, and blessings to the web from which all things come and to which all things return. Blessings and thanks to each one of you. Thank you so much for listening. I hope that you are well. Blessings and thanks. Hail and farewell.